The morning the story began, the private road that curled like white ribbon up to the Moreau estate smelled faintly of jasmine and ocean salt. The air was so clean on the hilltop that even the sound of the city below seemed filtered, sirens distant, traffic softened to a hush. A dozen gardeners in green polos were already trimming hedges that had been encouraged into perfect squares, an army of quiet geometry. Inside the mansion, screens scrolled stock tickers on walls that were not supposed to have clocks, because clocks were for people who needed reminders of time. Adrian Moreau liked to pretend he had wrestled time into a corner and negotiated a private truce. He was the kind of man who didn't walk into rooms so much as he rearranged the air when he entered. He was 53, as crisp and gleaming as his cufflinks, and he owned the hill you could see from 1,000 living-room windows in the city. He also owned the mistake of believing every problem could be bought a solution. His daughter, Luna, was 10. She had eyes like dark glass that held stars, and she did not speak. The doctors said many things. One report called it congenital apraxia, another developmental silence. A third, more cautious and colder, wrote what Adrian could not forgive. There may be no cause, only a difference. The difference had cost him more than any hostile takeover he'd ever waged. It made him feel powerless, and powerless made him furious, and fury in men like Adrian clothed itself in good intentions. So he built a schedule for Luna made of gold, therapeutic art on Tuesdays, specialist consultations on Thursdays, a nutritionist who measured the inches between blueberries, tutors with whisper-soft voices, a driving aphorism, "We will find a way," printed discreetly on the bottom of her breakfast tray where only he would know it was there. Marta, the housekeeper, sometimes watched Luna from the kitchen doorway as the girl sat cross-legged on the rug, turning the pages of books she never read aloud. Luna traced lines with her fingertip, edges of birds, the outline of a coastline, like she was mapping something her body already knew and her voice could not. On that particular morning, a city sanitation truck rumbled up the service road that hugged the side of the estate, the road no one photographed for magazines. It shuddered to a halt at the security gate with a patient sigh, as if it had been holding its breath the entire climb. The truck's paint had faded from municipal orange to the color of dried apricots. A gull perched on the mirror like a heckler. The driver stepped down, tall, broad-shouldered, in boots that had a history. His name was Jasper Reed. He wore his cap backward out of habit, not rebellion. A tattoo of 3 small triangles peeked from the cuff of his sleeve when he reached for the clipboard, a tattoo you might miss unless you were the sort of person who noticed quiet decisions. Jasper leaned into the call box. "Morning. Route 17, bin pull and special pickup for the North Slope." The security guard glanced at his monitor, and then at the truck as if offended by its audacity to exist. "North Slope isn't on municipal logs, private contractor only." Jasper took the news with the patience of people who do work that no one claps for. "Gate code's on my sheet," he said, passing the clipboard through the slot. The guard scanned it, frowned, and buzzed the gate open with a sound like a reluctant secret. From the balcony above the driveway, Luna watched the truck ease through. She wasn't supposed to be there alone. Her schedule said reading hour, but the schedule, like most of the adult world, was smaller than the sky. She had slipped away with her quiet shoes and her quieter steps, and found the place where wind kissed the corner of the house and brought the smell of the ocean to her hair. The truck made her chest feel full, not with fear but with the importance of something honest. The workers joked with each other the way people do when their backs ache but their spirits don't. One man swung down to move a row of overfilled recycling bins, and a cascade of glass chimed into the truck's open mouth. The sound was more beautiful than the doorbell in the front hall. Jasper glanced up to the balcony, because the hair on his arms had done that thing it did when he was being watched by someone who still believed in magic. He saw Luna. She saw him see her, and did not drop her eyes, though she usually did. He lifted his palm in a half-wave. She lifted hers back, and for a second their hands created a bridge across the air, plank by plank. "Reed!" his partner Deke called from the bins. "You doing autographs now?" "Shut up," Jasper said, but he was smiling. He moved to the back of the truck where a stray cardboard box sat on the bumper. The box had the logo of a luxury boutique on it, the kind of place that sold belts heavy as promises. It was empty except for tissue paper, thin as snow. Jasper pulled a black marker from behind his ear, he always carried one, and drew something with quick, confident strokes on the lid. He turned the box toward the balcony. On the white, an inked fox looked back, sly, gentle, trotting toward a pine tree whose needles were a handful of short lines. Beside the fox, he drew a small moon. Luna blinked once, then twice, before she understood. Fox and moon. Luna. Jasper set the box carefully on top of the sealed bin nearest the service path where deliveries were made. He didn't say anything. He didn't point. He went back to work. Luna left the balcony like a gust of wind had tugged her forward. She slipped down the servant stairs, the ones that curved without squeaking because so many footsteps had taught them silence, and crossed the corridor that smelled faintly of lemon oil and polish. She hesitated at the threshold of the mudroom. Children in her world were not supposed to open certain doors, and she always obeyed rules, not because she loved them, but because breaking them felt like tearing paper that could never be smoothed out again. The mudroom door into the service yard stood ajar. Wind nudged it open with a finger. Luna stepped into the bronze morning. No one saw her. The workers had moved to the far end of the slope, where the gardeners had left neatly bagged clippings. She reached the bin, lifted the box lid that was light as breath, and looked at the fox and the moon. Jasper had sketched 2 more lines while she descended. Now the fox's tail pointed toward a second, smaller moon tucked into the pine branches. Like a secret only the brave would find, she traced the moon with her fingertip. Her throat made a sound so small a hummingbird might mistake it for a cousin, air catching on the edge of a possibility. A voice behind her broke everything. "What do you think you're doing?" Sloane Barrett, Director of Public Affairs for Moreau Holdings, wore a dress the color of expensive grapes and a face trained by mirrors. She had appeared from the side path with the assassin stillness of people whose jobs require them to arrive where the problem is and make it look like they had always been there. She looked at Luna with a quick calculation. Risk, optics, control. Sloane plucked the box from Luna's hands like she was rescuing her from a disease. "This is trash," she said, with a smile that used the shape of kindness and none of its warmth. "We don't play with trash." She shoved the lid back onto the box and then, with the thoughtless force of someone proving a point, crushed it. The fox folded. The moon folded. The pine needles crossed like ribs. Paper made a breathless cracking sound. Jasper was already walking back because he had seen the girl and the PR woman, and the air around them had shifted into that bright, brittle weather you feel right before a glass falls. "Ma'am," he called, not loud, not rude. "That's mine. I'll toss it." Sloane didn't turn. "Exactly," she said. "Do your job." Luna's hands fluttered in the narrow space between them, like 2 birds looking for a sky. Her eyes flicked to Jasper, and then to the crushed box, and then to the truck, and something stricken flashed through them, a tide going out too fast. Sloane finally turned to Jasper. "You're on private property," she said. "Please stay within your designated area. We don't need displays." "Understood," Jasper said. He kept his voice calm because he knew the difference between a hill worth dying on and a hill where you quietly built a bridge overnight. He picked up the crushed box as if it were intact, as if you could carry dignity the same way you carry a fragile thing, with both hands. Sloane took Luna's elbow gently, always gently for the cameras that might be anywhere, and steered her toward the mudroom. "Come along, sweetheart. It's reading hour." Luna didn't resist. She didn't stomp or cry or yank away. She went where the hand told her to go with the posture of a small soldier who has learned that survival sometimes looks like stillness. But as she crossed the threshold, she looked back. Not at Sloane, not at the gate. At Jasper. He was watching her the way you watch a person you're trying to remember from a dream. He lifted 2 fingers from the crushed lid in a salute that meant, "I saw." Not the kind that shouts, the kind that keeps a promise. The door closed. The truck groaned and chewed the hill's discarded perfection. The gull laughed at a joke gulls have told forever. Inside, Adrian waited in the sunroom with a planner open on his knee. He had scheduled a new specialist at 2:00 p.m., a woman flown in from Zurich whose website promised miracles with the cool confidence of people who have never met grief in its pajamas. He looked up when Luna entered with Sloane. "There's my star," he said. He never said my daughter in public rooms, he said my star or my princess, because those were roles and roles could be directed. Luna folded onto the couch beside him, careful as always, a small astronaut docking. Sloane poured sparkling water and pretended not to be important to this family in a way that rewrote the lines other people thought were permanent. Adrian noticed the smudge of ink on Luna's fingertip. "What's this?" he asked, brushing it with his thumb, then looking at Sloane, who smiled a soft, lying smile. "She found a box outside," Sloane said. "One of the workers had been, doodling. I disposed of it." Adrian's mouth made a line as straight as a ledger. "Good, we don't need distractions." He turned the planner so Luna could see the list, the week a tidy ladder. "Today's a big day, sweetheart. I've arranged something special. We're going to help your voice find its way out." Luna looked at the planner and then at the window, where the service road curled out of view back toward the city. The truck's engine was only a memory now, but her body still hummed with it. A fox's tail, a moon in the branches, a gesture that held instead of pushed. Her hands moved without asking permission from her fear. She dragged a napkin toward her and picked up Adrian's pen. She drew in quick, hesitant lines. A circle, a triangle of ears, a swoop of tail. Then she drew a small crescent above the tail. Adrian stared, confounded. "Is that a cat?" Sloane, seeing the danger, the unknown, smiled wider. "Very creative," she said. "But let's keep our focus, yes?" Luna put the pen down. The napkin was not a fox, not really. It was the way a memory looks when you can't use sound. Her throat felt warm and prickly, like a word was made of sunlight and trying to push through. That afternoon, the Zurich specialist pressed soft electrodes below Luna's jaw and made encouraging noises in vowels that cost money. Luna did everything she was asked because she was brave in the quiet way, the way that doesn't win trophies but builds bridges inside people. No sound came. The specialist pronounced the session promising, which is what people say when they don't know whether to apologize. Night dropped a dark shawl over the hill. When Marta tucked Luna in, she left the window open 2 inches the way Luna liked, so the ocean could tell the house secrets all night. Luna lay on her side and looked at the napkin fox on her nightstand. A breeze lifted its corner. Somewhere down in the city, a sanitation truck backfired like a gun and then settled into a purr. Luna, who had not spoken since the neon immediacy of birth, put her palm against her throat like she sometimes did when she wanted to feel the hum of herself. In the garage on the service road's far end, Jasper parked the truck and wiped his hands on a rag that had known better days. Deke slapped him on the shoulder. "You drawing portraits for heiresses now?" he ribbed. Jasper half smiled, half sighed. "Just left something that wasn't mine to keep," he said. He stared at the city's slope of lights. "You ever get the feeling that the job you think you do and the job you're actually meant for are not the same thing?" "Every day," Deke said, opening a cooler and fishing out 2 waters. He lobbed one to Jasper. "But the one we actually meant for usually doesn't pay." Jasper unscrewed the cap. "Maybe not in money." He thought of the girl on the balcony with the star eyes and the careful hands and the silence that wasn't empty, just untranslatable. He thought of the way she had lifted her palm to his, bridge to bridge. He thought, without quite deciding to, "I'll take this route again next week, even if it meant swapping shifts, even if it meant arguing with the dispatcher who liked his maps neat." On the hill, Adrian closed his laptop and stared at the darkness pooling at the edges of the yard lights. He was not a man who believed in omens, but something had shifted that day, a weight he couldn't name. He poured a drink he didn't taste and told himself the Zurich specialist would bring results by the end of the quarter, the way he told his board a new product would ship by summer. In a drawer beside his bed, in an old envelope he had not opened in 3 years, lay a letter in a hand he knew better than his own. He did not touch it. He did not read it. He preferred his grief like he preferred his deals. Controlled, quantifiable, silent. The ocean moved like a sleeping animal. The city breathed. A fox, inked on a crushed lid, slept in a landfill where forgotten things sometimes dream. And in a house that had never allowed for miracles unless they could be invoiced, a girl whose voice had never found a door touched her throat and felt, for the first time, not the emptiness of a locked room, but the pressure of a key turning. Jasper Reed woke before the sun, because the city's veins start pulsing early. He drank coffee from a chipped mug that used to say County Fair, but now said only Kau Air, which felt about right. In the apartment above the laundromat, the pipes talked to each other and the neighbor's radio played a station that somehow broadcast memories. He laced his boots, checked his phone, and saw the text from dispatch. Route swap today. Take 9B, Seaside Hills reassigned. He stared at the grey bubbles like they could be talked out of existing. Then he typed with 2 fingers. Already pre-tripped for 17. We'll finish 17, then pick up 9B after lunch, promise. There was a long pause, then the digital equivalent of a shrug. He exhaled. He wasn't superstitious, but there are roads you're meant to stay on until the sign changes by itself. On the wall by his door hung 3 pencil sketches clipped to twine with clothespins. A fox, a crescent moon, a pine that was mostly negative space, the shape carved from what he didn't draw. He touched the edge of the moon and told himself that what he was doing, coming back to a house where he was barely allowed to exist, wasn't foolish. It was showing up for a person who lived behind glass. Deke was already in the yard, shoulder-checking a bulky compactor lever that stuck when the mornings were cold. "You got that look again," Deke said. "What look?" "The one where you're about to try something the rulebook forgot to write down." Jasper grinned, brief and rueful. "I'm just taking 17. Again." "Fine by me." Deke spat into the oil-black dirt. "Guy up there tips in lecture notes anyway." The truck rumbled to life, a beast resigned to service. They hit the city's low streets first, cardboard castles outside restaurants, blue bags slumped like tired men, alleys that smelled like onions and bleach. Then began the climb toward white fences and homes where exhaust fumes felt like a personal insult. At the Moreau gate, the same guard buzzed them in with the same face a statue wears when pigeons disrespect it. The gull was back too, or its cousin, claim-jumping the mirror. "North Slope first," Jasper said. He sounded casual, like they were discussing weather. The slope was shaded, cool even in sun. Bags of clipped rosemary breathed sharp, clean air into the morning. The gardeners nodded as men do, work to work. Jasper grabbed the first bin and set it to the lift. The hydraulic arms exhaled and the bin tipped, a rivulet of glass singing itself to pieces inside the truck's mouth. Jasper took out the black marker he kept behind his ear, not for a show, for a ritual. He never drew on anything that had to be kept, only on what the world planned to throw away. That way he was stealing nothing and giving something. He found the smooth back of a shipping sleeve and quickly inked a fox's paw prints, a small trail that led off the edge. Above the last print, he drew the suggestion of a moon, not a full circle, but a curve, as if the rest of it were hiding in the paper. He set the sleeve under the lip of the same bin as last time. "Reed," Deke called, nudging a second bin into place. "You're going to get us a lecture tip again." "Then we'll recycle it," Jasper said. Up at the house, Luna had tried to read, then tried to draw, then tried to disappear inside the space between 2 minutes. The schedule said, "Sensory integration, 9 a.m. It meant a room with white walls and tools with names that sounded like forgiveness, brushes, weights, swings that gave your body back to you 1 small inch at a time. She liked those sessions when Marta was the one to walk her down. Marta's steps matched Luna's breathing. Sloane's matched the metronome of reputation. That morning, Marta was in the pantry labeling jars with her neat block letters when Luna found her there. The girl paused in the doorway. She held out a folded napkin, last night's fox. Marta understood the currency of small offerings. She slid a tiny golf pencil from behind her ear. She kept them the way bakers keep cinnamon sticks, and placed it in Luna's palm. "Para você," she whispered, though they were alone. "For you." Little drawings fit in little pockets. Luna nodded, a movement that was its own language, and tucked the pencil into the seam of her sleeve, like a secret seamstress stitching a promise into a dress. They took the service corridor to the therapy room so they could pass the mudroom window. Outside, the truck shoulder-heaved another bin. The world was doing its loud, honest work. On the north slope, Jasper bent to tie a ripped garden bag. The gardener nearest him, an older man with elbows like knots and a name tag that said Eli, extended a hand to help. In the exchange their palms met, workers' code sparking faster than words. "You the one who draws," Eli said under his breath. Not accusation, recognition. Jasper's mouth tilted. "Only on trash." Eli glanced toward the house. "Not everything tossed deserves to go." He jerked his chin toward the mudroom window. Jasper glanced up as slowly as if he were checking the sky. Luna's face hovered in the glass, a pale moon cupped in wood. Not hovering, he corrected himself. Watching. Under the window frame, invisible to anyone not kneeling to tie a bag, lay a small arrangement of rosemary sprigs. Someone had placed them thoughtfully into the shape of a fox, tail flicked, nose pointed toward the gate. Jasper's chest did that tight expansion it did sometimes at the end of a song. He didn't look back at Eli. He didn't wave to the window. He just touched 2 fingers to the brim of his cap and, without words, stepped over the rosemary fox instead of through it, as if it were a threshold. Luna pressed her hand to the glass. Something rose in her throat like a startled bird, wings opening, then deciding to rest. The minute dissolved. Sloane's heeled footsteps found them. "Time," she said, crisp as ice. "Let's not be late. Let's not be." The therapy room had rings from old cups on one shelf no one used anymore. Luna lay on a mat, while a technician rolled a weighted ball down her shins and calves, speaking in that warm tone people use with animals and children and the very wealthy. Luna let the weight fold her into the ground, let it show her where her edges were. Inside the hum of the day, she carried the ghost of Rosemary on her fingers, and the sight of a man stepping over something small, as if it were large. By late morning, the truck had looped to the main courtyard, where the recycling carts waited like obedient soldiers. Jasper set a bin to the lift and heard, under the clink and rattle, a different sound, the dry jostle of paper. He looked down. Slipped between 2 glossy catalogues was a folded napkin. He didn't fish it out. He didn't let the movement look like curiosity. He tipped the bin, watched the paper miss the maw by a hair, catch a corner on the lip, and fall at his boot. He stepped back to adjust something, bent and palmed the napkin like a card trick. He didn't open it until he and Deke were at the far edge of the drive, moving a barrel of clippings. On the napkin was a fox. The line was careful, a little shaky, like the ground had tilted when the artist drew the tail. Above it, a half moon. He swallowed. The napkin had been folded twice. Inside the second fold near the crease was the smallest mark. 3 dots in a row. Not decoration, Morse code for S, or just 3 breaths counted so nothing would float away. "Fan mail?" Deke asked, peering. "Something like that." Jasper folded the napkin back along its original lines. He slid it into the notebook he kept in his back pocket, the one with sketches on the front and a grocery list written on the first page that he always ignored. The owner of the hill chose that exact moment to appear. Adrian Moreau moved the way some men pilot boats, like the floor is water, and they trust their own balance. 2 assistants drafted behind him like obedient clouds. His jaw was the kind expensive razors dream about. He surveyed the courtyard the way a general inspects a parade, and his gaze caught on the municipal orange. He didn't like orange. "Who authorized this truck to access the upper court?" he asked the heir. The heir answered by bringing him Sloane. "It's on their route," Sloane said lightly. "We could push pickups to 6 a.m. if you prefer they remain invisible." "Invisible is ideal," Adrian said. Jasper let his hands busy themselves with a lid, even as part of him pulled up straight. He had stood in front of men like this in different uniforms, teachers who mistook poverty for indiscipline, managers who mistook sweat for stupidity. Respect costs nothing and buys almost everything, his mother used to say. He turned with a calm face. "Morning," he offered. "We'll be clear in 10. Adrian's gaze landed on Jasper long enough to convert him to an inventory line. "Sloane, inform facilities. I want private collection reinstated by month's end." He moved to go, then paused, attention snagging by something that had not fit his picture. Eli, the gardener, had placed a short white wand, one of the estate's cut-flower stakes, into the dirt by the path. The stake held nothing. It simply marked a small patch of rosemary no one was walking through. "What's that?" Adrian asked. "A marker," Eli said, neutral. "For what?" Adrian pressed. Eli's hands stayed easy at his sides. "For not trampling." Sloane's smile made an appearance, wide and empty. "Charming," she said, which is what people say when they plan to remove something after lunch. Adrian nodded once and moved on. It wasn't worth a second of his money. Jasper finished the courtyard sweep with Deke, who muttered, "Invisible, my favorite uniform color." They rolled the last bin to the lift. As it tipped, a chunk of mirror slid out, hit the lip and burst into bright knives. Deke jerked, cursed, and would have caught a shard with his forearm if Jasper hadn't yanked him back by the vest in a move that had been a reflex since an accident 3 jobs ago taught him how fast blood can argue. "You okay?" Jasper asked. "Could have been stitches," Deke said, exhaling. Jasper scanned for a broom. There was none. Then Marta appeared in the doorway with a dustpan and brush like a stagehand who knows where the props actually live. She knelt, swept with quiet competence, and held out the pan for Jasper to steady. Their eyes met, worker to worker, keepers of the running world. From the shadow of the doorway, Luna stood beside Marta's hip, half hidden. She watched Jasper's hands. From a distance she could map in her sleep, and then looked at Deke's sleeve, where a stray sliver had nicked the fabric, but not the skin. She lifted her fingers, touched her own forearm, then her throat, then opened her mouth just a little. Not enough for a word. Enough for a breath with shape. Jasper heard it the way a person who has slept beside a river can tell when the water changes speed. Not sound exactly. The idea of sound arriving at the station to buy a ticket. He didn't look at Luna when it happened. He kept his gaze on the pan, on the glass, on the ordinary. When Marta rose, he whispered, "Thank you." "Por nada," she said, and meant it. By noon, the truck rolled back down the hill, belly full of what the rich discard. The radio crackled with dispatch, asking if they could still cover 9B. "We'll make it," Jasper said, "because promises are bridges too." On the estate, the afternoon unspooled like ribbon. Sloane took calls framed by palm trees. Adrian dialed Zurich again to confirm the next session's invoice, then deleted an email from legal about privacy concerns, as if deleting could erase ethics. Marta set lemon peels to simmering on the stove, because scent can calm a house even when no one sits down. Luna waited for the exact moment guards switch posts, when attention resets and cameras look where yesterday's trouble came from. She slipped into the mudroom, opened the door to the service yard, and stepped to the rosemary patch. The white stake Eli had planted stood soldier still. Luna knelt and rearranged the sprigs, giving the fox a longer tail, a nose tilted not toward the gate now, but toward the road, toward away. Her small hands hovered above the new shape. Against the low hum of the generator, she counted 3 beats, and then pressed the center of her sternum with her fingertips. It wasn't a ritual anyone taught her. It was how she told her body, "Here you are." "Luna." Sloane's voice, not unkind, materialized behind her. The girl rose, turned, and did not hide the rosemary fox with her foot the way fear suggested. Sloane followed the glance to the ground, took in the shape, catalogued it under narratives that could go wrong, and smiled in a way that meant, "We will remove this, but not while you're looking." "Your father wants to show you the new room downstairs," Sloane said. "He's had it prepared just for you." The room downstairs used to be a wine cellar. Now it was a progress environment, outfitted with screens, an interactive wall, a whisper-quiet treadmill that claimed to integrate vestibular feedback. Adrian stood there already, hands in pockets, like a man presenting a yacht. "Everything here is designed to help you find your voice," he said, every syllable an investment. Luna stood in the doorway. She knew what help felt like. This felt like strategy. She turned her head slightly. On the far wall, past the screens, a narrow window ran along the ceiling where the basement met the yard. Through that sliver, she could see a wedge of sky, and if she wondered hard enough, she could imagine a fox's tail disappearing into the rosemary. Adrian mistook her glance for interest. "We'll start tomorrow," he said, satisfied, and Sloane smiled her museum smile. That evening, after the house forgot to remember her, Luna slipped the golf pencil from her sleeve and the napkin from under her pillow. She traced the fox again, slower. This time she added something she had never drawn before. 3 tiny triangles at the bottom corner, stacked like a promise. She didn't know why she drew them, only that the man with the backwards cap carried the same mark on his arm, and the sight of it had felt like a door held open in a storm. In the low streets, Jasper and Deke finished 9B under a sky that turned nickel and then wine. At a red light, Jasper took the notebook from his pocket and slid out the napkin. He studied the line of the fox, the 3 dots, the half-moon. He thought of a girl pressing her hand to a pane of glass, and of a rosemary animal spared a boot heel because someone had said, "Not everything tossed deserves to go." At home he tacked the napkin beside his own sketch, the 3 triangles on his arm, inked there the day he left a different life, lifted when the muscle flexed. Show up. Tell the truth. Carry light. Not a creed anyone had given him, one that had accrued like sediment until it became rock. He sat at the little table, opened the notebook, and drew something new. Not a fox. A bridge. 2 simple spans arcing from opposite banks, almost touching, not yet. Above one span, he inked a small crescent. Above the other, 3 dots. He tore out the page and folded it twice. Morning would come again. Gates would open and close. People would repeat themselves. But sometimes, if you kept walking the same road with your eyes open and your hands ready, you found the place where 2 halves of a thing finally met. And in a house that was learning, against its will, that money can pave roads but not build bridges, a girl fell asleep with a pencil under her pillow and the sensation in her throat. Not pain, not pressure exactly, but a rising, like the first step of a word deciding to exist. The 3rd week of September arrived dressed in late summer light. The Moreau estate glowed like a postcard no one was meant to write on. Manicured lawns, white gravel drives, a house too perfect to have fingerprints. But in small corners, where no security camera lingered, life began to bloom in unscripted ways. Luna had discovered a rhythm. At 9:30 each Thursday, the same orange truck climbed the service road, growling through the gate with patient defiance. The gull still rode the mirror. The same 2 men stepped down, Deke first, loud and laughing, Jasper second, quiet and steady. And every Thursday, when Marta accidentally left the pantry window cracked, Luna found a reason to linger nearby. She pretended to look for jam jars or color new labels, but her eyes always drifted to the yard, to the man who drew on what others threw away. That morning, Jasper leaned his elbow on the truck's edge and began sketching again. He used a thick piece of discarded cardboard, the kind that bent when it rained, and drew lines that seemed to move even while still. He drew a small bridge, arcing over a river that wasn't there. On one side of the bridge, a fox waited. On the other, a small moon rose from the paper's edge. When he finished, he propped the cardboard against the bin, not too obviously, not too hidden, and continued his work. Luna saw it from the pantry and felt something tug deep inside her chest, a line that hummed beneath the skin. She waited until Marta's attention turned to the stove, then slipped out the side door, quiet as memory. The cardboard waited in the rosemary patch, sunlight flickering across it. Luna crouched and traced the bridge's curve. The texture was rough, but it didn't matter. She took the small pencil from her sleeve and added something new, 3 dots above the moon. Her hand trembled when she did it, not from fear but from recognition. That afternoon Jasper returned to find the bridge changed. He almost missed it. He'd been distracted by the weight of a dozen other stops, the ache in his shoulder that came from lifting lives too heavy to throw away. But there it was, the 3 dots, small as hope, inked in a child's careful hand. He smiled, the kind of smile that lives in the eyes more than the mouth. "Guess she got my message," he murmured. Deke squinted. "What message?" "Just a bridge," Jasper said, shrugging. Nothing important. But it was important. He felt it in his chest, that old ache that wasn't pain exactly, but the memory of having once cared too much. By the end of the week, the house had changed. Not for Adrian, who moved through rooms like a man inspecting glass, but for the staff who noticed the little things. Marta noticed Luna humming faintly while drying her brushes, not words, just sound, like wind through trees. Eli noticed the fox-shaped rosemary patch kept reappearing, no matter how often the landscapers trimmed the hedge. Even Sloane noticed, though she called it regression through imagination and made a note to tell the therapist. Luna's therapist, however, was the only one who saw it for what it was: movement. Not speech, not yet, but an opening. She sent her report to Adrian with cautious optimism. Progress is rarely linear. Sometimes silence is not the absence of voice, but the construction of it. Adrian read it twice, frowned, and forwarded it to Sloane with one line: "Find out what's distracting her." The following Thursday, the air smelled of rain before it fell. The truck arrived late, mud splattering its tires. Deke jumped down first, muttering about the sky's bad attitude. Jasper, soaked through his sleeves, still looked for the balcony. No Luna, no window. He worked quietly, lifting, sorting, returning. When he turned toward the rosemary patch, he saw something that made him stop mid-step. A small envelope, white, folded twice, weighed down by a stone. He crouched, careful not to disturb the leaves. Inside was a drawing, the bridge again, but now with figures. A fox on one side, a little girl on the other, and in between, 3 dots forming a path across the arch. Jasper swallowed hard. Whoever taught her to see the world this way had given her something rare, or maybe it was the world itself that had given it. He drew back on the same paper, pressing it against the truck's side. He added to her drawing, the bridge complete, and beneath it, ripples forming circles that reached both banks. Then, in small letters near the corner, he wrote, "The bridge works both ways." He replaced the envelope exactly where he found it. Later that day, Luna slipped through the garden after her lessons, heart pounding like footsteps in her chest. The rain had stopped but left the earth soft and sweet-smelling. The envelope was still there. She opened it carefully, read the new words, and traced them with her fingertip. "The bridge works both ways." She whispered the sentence in her mind, shaping each syllable without sound. Her lips formed the rhythm, her breath followed. She felt her throat tighten, not in fear, but in strength. For a moment, she imagined her voice leaving her body and crossing the paper like a small boat. When she went back inside, Marta caught the glow in her face. "What did you find, meu anjo?" Luna only smiled and tapped her throat, then her chest. Marta blinked, startled. "You feel it?" she asked softly. Luna nodded once. Meanwhile, Sloane stood in Adrian's office with a folder in hand. "You asked me to find the distraction," she said. Adrian didn't look up from his screen. "And?" Sloane opened the folder. Inside were photographs from the security system, grainy but clear enough. Luna in the garden, kneeling by the rosemary. A man in orange uniform bending nearby. "The sanitation crew," Sloane said. "He seems friendly." Adrian's eyes lifted. "Friendly?" "I've checked his background. Jasper Reed, 38, widowed, served 5 years in municipal sanitation, prior military service. Nothing illegal, but—" She paused. "It's unorthodox. Your daughter's fixation could affect her therapy." Adrian leaned back in his chair. The word fixation bothered him. It sounded too much like love. "Terminate the route," he said. "I'll have private contractors handle the waste again." Sloane nodded. "And the man?" "Forget him. He's irrelevant." The next Thursday, the orange truck didn't come. The gate stayed shut. The rosemary fox wilted in the afternoon heat. Luna waited by the window until the light changed color, until even Marta's voice couldn't pull her away. When Adrian came home that evening, she didn't look up. She didn't eat. She didn't draw. The next morning, her therapist noted the sudden regression in her file. "Patient shows withdrawal," she wrote. "Possible emotional trigger." Adrian signed the report without reading past the first line. 3 days later, Jasper's supervisor handed him a new route sheet. No more 17, no more hill. "Management says it's private property again," the man said. "They're paying double for exclusive service. Guess the rich don't like sharing their garbage." Jasper nodded. "Guess not." That night, he sat at his kitchen table staring at the sketch pinned to the wall, The bridge, the fox, the 3 dots. His hand itched for the pen. Finally, he gave in. He drew again, slower this time. The bridge, but broken in the middle, one side fading into the dark. Beneath it he wrote a single line, "Even bridges can vanish when no one crosses." A week passed. The house on the hill went silent again. Luna stopped humming. She stopped drawing. Luna turned to her, eyes wet but steady. She took the small pencil and napkin from her pocket, the ones she kept hidden, and wrote a single word in blocky, hesitant letters. Bridge. Marta covered her mouth, tears spilling without permission. "You wrote," she whispered. Luna nodded. She tapped her throat once, then her heart twice, the same rhythm she'd seen Jasper make when he'd touched his chest that day. And for the first time Marta believed what the doctors never had, that silence was not absence, it was a seed. The bridge was broken but not gone, and somewhere in the city below, a man in an orange jacket couldn't sleep because he felt, without reason or proof, that someone small and brave was still trying to cross it. The orange route map on Jasper's dashboard looked like a heartbeat gone wrong. Lines that once led up the ridge had been rerouted, replaced by a blank white space where the Moreau estate sat like a missing tooth. Every time he glanced at it, he felt a small stutter under his ribs. He tried to work around the feeling. Work usually worked. You lifted, you separated, you moved on. But that afternoon at a diner near the river, the TV over the counter flashed a silent crawl. Moreau Foundation hosts silent auction to fund new pediatric wing. B-roll of the house on the hill, glass, marble. A shot of the lower garden, brief but there, the paper fox cutout wedged in the rosemary hedge. Jasper paid for his coffee and left it untouched. At the estate, silence had edges. Sloane sharpened them. "The child will like whatever keeps her routine predictable," Sloane replied, voice soft as a blade's underside. "And predictable means no surprises from the outside." Eli nodded and walked away, but his feet slowed near the pantry window. He found Marta there, hands deep in dough, eyes flaring like match heads. "You heard," he whispered. She washed her hands, dried them on her apron, and slid a small paper bag into the compost caddy by the back door, a bag that did not belong. Eli raised an eyebrow. She met his gaze and dropped her voice lower. "If a river wants to find the sea," she said, "it finds a way." "Route 17 again?" he asked. Jasper started to answer, but a supervisor jogged over, waving a clipboard. "Reed," he called. "Emergency pull. Private contractor on Ridge Drive jammed their compactor. Bio-waste hazard. County says whoever's closest." Deke pointed at Jasper's truck. "Closest is this guy." Jasper didn't smile, didn't speak. He just climbed into the cab and turned the key. The gull on the mirror knocked twice with its beak and held on. The Moreau gate recognized the truck and pretended it didn't. Jasper waited while the intercom huffed to life. "Delivery," came a man's voice. The smaller gate opened like it was learning the motion for the first time. Jasper drove in slow. The gravel popped under the tires like old bones. He parked beside the stalled private rig, its rear plate glowing warning red. A manager in a blue windbreaker rushed up, relieved to find anyone who knew what to do. "We've got kitchen refuse cross-compacted with glass. We can't retract the plate without shattering the cylinder." "Okay," Jasper said. He walked once around the unit, hand on the housing like a doctor reading a pulse through a patient's wrist. "You got a slip bar?" The man blinked. "A what?" He eased the jam free without drama. Leverage, patience, a well-placed wedge made from a snapped broom handle. When the cylinder gave, the whole machine exhaled, and the manager laughed nervously, as if afraid to be grateful. "Sign the release," Jasper said. "You're good." The man scribbled. "They're hosting some charity thing tonight," he offered, as if that were payment. "Whole place is nervous." "Yeah," Jasper said. He climbed down. He could feel it, nervous like water that can't find a path and starts to rise. He didn't go looking for the garden, but his feet went that way anyway. The rosemary had been shaved down to obedient nubs, the fox's negative space erased. He stopped by the compost set out. A paper bag sat atop the sealed bin, neatly folded once, like an apology. He checked the yard. No eyes but the gull. He tucked the bag under his jacket and walked back to the truck. Inside the cab, he opened it. A single napkin inside, stiff with dried flour, inked with blocky letters, formed by a careful, stubborn hand. Bridge. He kept the napkin in his jacket pocket and drove away before his hands could decide to do something reckless. At 5, guests began arriving, dresses with smiles, men with polished watches. The house gleamed for them. Sloane's team distributed bid paddles and flute glasses and instructions disguised as compliments. Adrian stood in the foyer like a man who had built a ship from mirrors and refused to see himself in any. Luna wore navy blue and a ribbon at her wrist. She held her sketchbook like a diary and did not look at the door the way her eyes wanted to. Her therapist had said she did not need to speak. It was fine. The event was background noise. It would pass through her like wind through tall grass, but the therapist did not know about bridges. Midway through the silent auction, a center table clattered as a server stumbled, ice skidding across marble. People gasped. The sound was nothing. Luna did not startle. What broke her gaze was the faint metallic clang from the service hall, the particular sound of a bin lid closing. She knew the rhythm of that sound now. She could feel it in her ribs. She turned her head before caution could catch up. Through the doorway, past the long table of donated watches and framed vacations, she saw a flash of orange, a jacket moving away, not toward, a shape like a sentence unfinished. Her body moved before her mind negotiated terms. She slipped the ribbon off her wrist and let it fall, then followed the sound like you follow heat when you're cold. Marta saw her, realized, and set a tray down too quickly. Glass chimed. Eyes turned the wrong way. Perfect. Luna crossed the hall and the service door swallowed her. Jasper stood in the alcove with his clipboard, waiting for the manager to countersign an additional form. He was not supposed to be there now. He was not supposed to be anywhere near here again. He knew that the way he knew a storm's first wind, on the skin before the trees. He heard the light step behind him and turned gently, as if sudden movement might scare a deer. She stood in the doorway with big night-colored eyes, hair clipped back, breath making her chest flutter. For a second, both of them just stood with the truth. The bridge had not been broken, it had only been hidden. Jasper didn't speak. He didn't even smile. He lifted his right hand, palm open, level with his heart, and pressed 2 fingers against his chest, twice. He'd done it the day they met. She had answered in kind. Now, he did it again, and hers came back to him. Tap, tap, heart, heart. Some sounds don't need sound. He reached slowly into his jacket, not the inside pocket with the napkin, but the one with the small black notebook. He flipped to a page his wife had once sketched on, lines ghosted now by time and handling. Naomi's neat letters labeled the drawing. Shared air, count, breathe, don't name the fear. He showed the page and then, with just breath, demonstrated. A second finger, 2. Hold, not like you're trapped, like you're choosing. A third, 3. Exhale, steady, like letting go of a rope you've been gripping too long. Luna's shoulders lowered, a fraction. Her mouth opened slightly, not for speech, for air. She mirrored him, 1, 2, 3. The hallway seemed to widen. Jasper turned the notebook and, on the opposite page, drew the curve of the bridge in 3 strokes. Then, below it, 3 dots. He let the pencil hover over the left bank, just above where a small fox might be, and looked at her, asking without asking. She took the pencil. A footstep at the far end of the hall snapped the moment's stem. Voices. The manager with the windbreaker, another with a radio. Jasper closed the notebook. Luna tucked her hands behind her back, the way children do when they've touched something the world says they shouldn't. The manager rounded the corner. "There you are," he said to Jasper, already talking past the room. "I need one more." He stopped when he saw the girl. His tone shifted into the wheedling voice adults use when they don't know how to be honest. "You shouldn't be here, sweetheart. Let's—" "Miss Luna," Sloane's voice cut in, cool and immediate, from behind him. "Back to the gallery, please." Sloane stepped forward, professional smile pressed flat. "Mr. Reed," she said, "we appreciate your prompt response today. Your services are no longer required." Jasper nodded once. He didn't argue, he didn't ask. But before he left, he reached into his other pocket and withdrew the folded flour-stiff napkin. He held it up just high enough for Sloane to see the word. Then he turned it face out toward Luna and pressed it to the side of the compactor housing, where a magnet clip held wrote notes. The napkin stuck. The word faced her like a door sign. "Of course," Jasper replied, voice even. He touched 2 fingers to his chest again, once now, not twice, and backed away. He left by the south door, the gull hitting the air with 2 hard beats before gliding into the tree line. The silent auction grew louder. Money always sounds like approval when enough of it moves at once. Adrian shook hands that felt like contracts. He caught Sloane's eye across the room. She nodded once. Problem contained. Routine restored. Until Marta slipped a small card into Adrian's suit pocket as she passed with a platter. He withdrew it later, in the brief privacy of the coat room. Just 2 lines in Marta's careful hand. She wrote today. He stared at the words, and for a moment the room tilted. He remembered a hospital room he did not visit enough, a NICU monitor beeping like a metronome cutting time into sellable units, an infant's chest rising and falling under a web of wires. He remembered telling himself that providing was loving. He remembered believing it. He put the card back in his pocket and returned to the party with a smile no one noticed cracking. After the last bid sheet was tallied, the house exhaled bodies and perfume. The staff cleaned quietly, restoring symmetry to a place that had been occupied by asymmetrical lives. Luna should have been in bed. Instead, she was in the south corridor again, feet cold on stone, hands tucked inside her sleeves. The napkin still clung to the metal. Bridge. She stood in front of it like a pilgrim in a small chapel, unsure how to pray. Luna lifted one hand and with her thumb traced each letter on the napkin. Then she pressed her palm flat against the cool steel. Her voice did not come like in movies, no sudden flood, no orchestral swell. It came like a match struck in wind, threatened, wavering, but bright enough to exist. "Bree," she breathed. The consonants snagged. Her throat trembled. She closed her eyes, remembered the fingers. 1, 2, 3, and tried again. Bree. Deej. The girl stood very still, eyes wide as if she had touched fire and not been burned. Then she looked down the corridor toward the door, where Orange had disappeared hours ago. She wasn't finished. The words were stitched together, heavy with breath, but they held. The hallway could barely contain them. Marta sank to her knees and folded the girl into her arms. "Yes," she said into Luna's hair. "Yes, meu anjo, it does." On the other side of the city, Jasper lay awake on his couch, Naomi's notebook open on his chest. The apartment was full of the kind of quiet a person earns when they keep promises to the dead. He had not meant to keep this one, get involved, care again, but promises have a way of finding people worthy of them. He closed the notebook and looked at the ceiling. The gull, reckless as ever, had nested on the window ledge. It thumped once against the glass, as if to say, "Look up. Bridges are sky too." His phone buzzed on the coffee table. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Then he did. A voice breathed on the other end, rough with crying and pride, the vowels rounded by another language. "Mr. Jasper," Marta said, "I must tell you something. Just once. Then I will never call again if you wish." Jasper sat up. "Go ahead." He closed his eyes, leaned forward, elbows on knees. His chest felt too small for his heart. "What did she say?" he asked. There was a pause long enough to hear a gull call through 2 miles of night. "Bridge," Marta said. "And then she said, 'Works both ways.'" For a long moment neither of them spoke. Some silences are monuments. "Thank you," he said at last, "until the middle feels like home." But now he knew. Someone small and brave had crossed, and the gate had not stopped her. The gate had learned briefly, beautifully, how to open. Adrian Birch didn't hear the word so much as he felt it break in his chest like glass. Daddy. No longer a phantom sound from old home videos. This time it had weight. It rolled across the foyer tiles, struck the base of the staircase, and came back to him with echoes that tasted like salt. Luna stood there with Jasper's navy hoodie swallowing her shoulders, her small hand still nested inside the janitor's palm. She looked stunned by her own voice, as if it had slipped out of her before she could stop it. The chandelier hummed. Outside, a gull tilted in the square of pale sky. Time stalled and breathed. "Luna," Adrian whispered. He didn't realize he'd stepped forward until he felt the cool metal of the banister under his hand. "Sweetheart, did you—" Her eyes flicked to Jasper, seeking permission or maybe shelter. Jasper's mouth opened, then closed. He lifted his free hand slightly, the way you might steady a skittish foal. No theatrics. Just an ordinary man braced against an extraordinary moment. Sloane filled the pause with motion. Heels clicking, phone already angled, voice sliding into a polished register. "We should document." "Put the phone down," Adrian said without looking at her. Calm on the surface, an undertow beneath. Sloane obeyed, though the muscles along her jaw twitched. "I just thought, not now." He went to one knee so his eyes were level with his daughter's. Luna's hair had slipped loose from the ribbon. A strand clung to her lip. He resisted the impulse to remove it. "Leave everything as it is," he told himself, as if altering a single thread would break the spell. Can I hold you?" he asked. Luna's throat moved. She released Jasper's hand and took 2 hesitant steps. When she reached Adrian, she folded into him with a small, decisive exhale, as if she'd been holding her breath for years. She didn't speak again. She didn't need to. Adrian pressed his face into her shoulder, and for the first time since the neurology consults, the experimental clinics, the nightly prayers that tarnished into habit, he let himself cry. Jasper stood where she'd left him, eyes lowered to the stone, hands at his sides. Sloane observed him the way one studies a rare instrument, appraising, suspicious of the strings. A tide of possibilities moved behind her eyes. Media, donors, board optics. Words cued, clarifying, weaponizing. When Adrian finally rose, he kept one arm around Luna. "Jasper," he said, "come with us, please." Jasper's gaze flicked to the doorway, the corridor that led back to the staff wing and then returned. "If that's what you want, sir." "It is." He looked to Sloane. "You as well." They crossed the long corridor to the small music room, the one Adrian hadn't entered in months because it smelled like rehearsals that would never happen. Without speaking, he pushed open the French doors to the garden and let the ocean air temper the memory. The room breathed. He gestured to the sofa. Luna sat. Jasper remained standing until Adrian repeated the gesture more firmly. At last, he perched on the edge like someone waiting outside an ICU door. Sloane took a chair, crossed her legs and flipped a mental notebook open. "First things first," she said. "What exactly happened?" Luna's knuckles tightened. She slid her hand along the hem of Jasper's sleeve in a quick, private movement, as if to anchor herself to the plain cloth. "It was simple," Jasper said. "She was stuck. I showed her a way to unstick. Or no." He frowned. "That's not right. She showed herself, I think. I just scooted the gate." "The gate?" Sloane echoed. "I'm going to need more rigorous—" "Let him talk," Adrian said. Jasper nodded, grateful for the small shelter. "There's a pattern I use, 3 points. He tapped the back of his left hand with the forefinger of his right. 1, 2, 3. A triangle you can build anywhere. On the underside of a desk, on your palm, between the window latch and the radiator screw and the notch in the baseboard. You look at each point and name it, silently if you need to. Here, here, here. Then you breathe along the edges you've drawn in your head. It's a way of giving the panic a geometry so it can't flood the whole room." Sloane's eyebrow rose. "And this is what, something you learned on TikTok?" Jasper's mouth twitched. "From someone who knew what it's like to be trapped inside your own skull." "Naomi," Adrian said quietly. Jasper looked up, surprised by the name in Adrian's mouth. He nodded. "My wife." A gull cried beyond the hydrangeas. The sound had the ragged edge of a torn sail. "She was a speech therapist," Jasper continued. "Not by license, not after the concussion. but she kept helping kids on our block. She used to call it building ladders where there aren't stairs. The 3 points were hers. A way to make a path when the ground is fog. Sloane laced her fingers. And you tried it with Luna. Luna tried it with Luna, he corrected. I just drew the first triangle. Adrian swallowed. And then she said, Daddy, Jasper finished, soft as cloth. Sloane's gaze sharpened. With all respect, this will be very hard to substantiate. We don't have video, we don't— That's a blessing, Adrian snapped. It's an opportunity, Sloane countered. Imagine what this could do for the Foundation, for research, for families who've stopped hoping. If we share the methodology— It isn't a methodology, Jasper said. It's a person, your person. She's not an asset to deploy. The sentence hung there humming. Sloane's nostrils flared, but she held her line. Jasper, I appreciate your role. No one's minimizing it. But we do need to think about what comes next. Press will get wind. Someone always leaks. We should control the narrative before it controls us. Control? Adrian repeated. The word tasted wrong. It tasted like the months he'd built schedules out of desperation. 8 minutes of flashcards, 10 minutes of jaw stretches, rest, repeat. It tasted like clinical corridors and forged smiles. No. We're going to protect it. We're going to protect her. Sloane pivoted to strategy. Then at least let's formalize Jasper's involvement. Consultant, not janitor. Optics matter. Background checks, NDAs. Jasper flinched at the word, not at the legalese, but at the assumption tucked inside it, that the miracle he'd just witnessed would be ground into paperwork until it went chalky and unrecognizable. I'll sign what you need, he said, almost too quickly. But not if it muzzles her. Adrian glanced at Luna. She'd slipped 1 foot out of her shoe and was tracing a triangle on the carpet fibers with her toe. Here, here, here. He felt something rearrange itself under his ribs, like furniture nudged into a room's natural shape at last. Nothing is getting signed tonight, he said. Sloane, please call Dr. Shu quietly. Ask her to come to the house. No team, no press, just her. Sloane's mouth compressed. She'll want scans. She'll want to meet my daughter as a person, Adrian said. If she doesn't, we'll find someone who will. He softened his tone an inch. Please, Sloane stood. I'll make the call. She paused in the doorway, eyes tracking Jasper like a hawk that had yet to decide if the shape in the grass was prey or ally. And I'll draft a minimal NDA, 2 paragraphs, temporary. Jasper nodded once, grateful for the truce. When she was gone, the room loosened. The ocean threw silver back at the sky. A bee shouldered through a hydrangea bloom. Luna drew another triangle on the carpet, and then, gently, turned her foot to connect it to the first. 2 shapes sharing a side. Luna, Adrian said, would you like me to show you something? She looked up, wary but curious. He rose, crossed to the piano bench and lifted the lid. He hadn't touched the keys since the night she'd turned away, and the sound had cracked something unfixable between them. His hands hovered above middle C. He didn't play. He didn't dare. Instead, he reached into the sheet music basket and withdrew a pad of heavy paper and a charcoal pencil. He returned to her side and sat on the rug, so his suit creased, and picked up carpet lint. Show me your points, he said. She tilted the pad, marked 3 dots with shy precision. The triangle was slightly scalene. He loved it for that. He placed his forefinger on each dot, naming them softly. Here, here, here. He breathed with her as they traced the edges in the air. May I add one? He asked. She hesitated, then nodded. He printed a 4th dot just outside the triangle and tapped it. Me, he said. Then he touched the 3 she'd made. You, you, you. He connected the lines so that his dot and hers made a diamond. Together. Something eased in her shoulders. She leaned in until her temple touched his arm. It was the slightest movement, but it lit a small lamp behind his ribs. A shadow shifted in the doorway. Adrian looked up, expecting Sloane, but it was Maria, the housekeeper who'd taught him the precise angle to tilt a bedroom window so the ocean smell came in without the damp. She stopped when she saw them on the floor. Her eyes glistened. She had been waiting for this house to exhale as long as anyone. "Mr. Birch," she said softly, "Dr. Shu is on her way, and someone from security says there are photographers at the gate." Adrian's jaw set. "Already?" "I can move them along," Jasper said quietly. "I've done it before." "You shouldn't have to," Adrian replied. He looked to Maria. "Tell security to close the street for now. Buy us an hour." Maria nodded and vanished with the efficiency of someone who knew how to reduce the footprint of chaos. Adrian faced Jasper. "Why 3 points?" he asked. "Why not 2 or 5? Jasper's gaze went out the open doors to the horizon line. 2 points make a line. No inside, no place to stand. 4 can feel like a box. People who panic don't like boxes. 3 makes a field. Small enough to keep your ghosts in sight, big enough to turn around without hitting the walls. Adrian absorbed that. He thought about all the boxes he'd built around Luna, beautiful, expensive boxes with velvet linings, each one narrower than the last. He thought about the first time he'd watched an MRI machine swallow her like a mechanical whale. He thought about the way she'd stared at the ceiling tiles and counted the holes like stars. "Naomi must have been remarkable," he said. Jasper's mouth softened at the edges. "She was a lantern, even when the glass cracked." "What happened?" Adrian asked, careful. "The short story is a driver ran a red and took the long story with him," Jasper said. "She lost a ribbon of memory. Her words wandered sometimes. She didn't trust herself to practice clinically after that, but she never stopped listening. She used to say, 'When a person can't get the word out, we make the doorway bigger.'" Adrian looked at his daughter's small triangle. "And if the doorway still won't open?" Jasper traced the air above the page with a fingertip. "Then we build a porch and sit with them there." Footsteps clicked down the corridor. Sloane's cadence. She reappeared with a thin sheaf of paper and a pen. 2 paragraphs, she announced. "No gag clause beyond patient privacy. It says we keep this within the family until we decide otherwise. It also clarifies that Jasper's presence here is at our invitation and that we compensate him as a consultant, not a contractor." Jasper blinked. "Compensate? You helped my daughter speak," Adrian said. "You don't sweep floors for me anymore unless you want to." Colour rose under Jasper's stubble. He looked at Luna, not Adrian. "Is that what you want?" he asked her. Luna studied him. She lifted the charcoal pencil, drew a tiny triangle in the lower corner of the page, then tapped the dot he'd called me. She tapped his chest once, hesitantly, then twice to be sure. Finally, she set the pencil down and nodded. "All right," Jasper said, his voice thick. "All right." Sloane handed him the paper. He scanned it, signed. Adrian signed. Sloane's pen paused over her line and, just for a breath, her gaze slipped to Luna. Really slipped, not as a calculation, but as a person looking at a person. Something human moved across her face and was gone. She finished the signature. A car door thumped outside. Maria appeared again. "Dr. Shu is here." Dr. Shu entered with a canvas tote and no coat, hair wind-mussed by the cliff road. She smelled like peppermint tea and the kind of hospitals that had windows. Her gaze found Luna immediately and softened. She didn't offer a hand or a question or a clipboard. She crouched so she was on the rug with them, suit pants be damned. "Hi, Luna," she said. "I'm May. You can kick me out if I make you tired." Luna glanced at Adrian, then Jasper, then back to Dr. Shu. She didn't speak. She didn't hide. Dr. Shu nodded as if that was the exact answer she'd hoped for. "May I sit with you and breathe?" she asked. Luna considered, then patted the rug. Dr. Shu sat. She clocked the paper, the 3 dots, the faint charcoal smear on Luna's thumb. "These are beautiful," she said to Luna, not to the room. "Triangles are brave." Adrian felt his throat close. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Sloane lower herself carefully onto the piano bench, as if a too quick move would startle the air. "Tell me what happened," Dr. Shu murmured, still watching Luna. But the question angled toward Jasper. He told the story plainly, without frosting. The hallway, the bolt noise, the triangle on a palm, the word like a match head. Dr. Shu listened as if each sentence might need to be cupped in 2 hands. When he finished, she looked at Luna and very gently touched her own palm with 3 fingertips in the same pattern Jasper had used. "May I show you mine?" she asked. Luna's shoulders rose and fell. She held out her hand. Dr. Shu drew 3 dots with the charcoal and blew away the extra dust as if blessing a wound. Luna traced them with a tiny, serious finger. Here, here, here. The room breathed with her. "Sometimes," Dr. Shu said softly, "our mouths stop trusting that sound won't hurt. Triangles help. So do people who wait without pushing." She did not say miracle. She did not say breakthrough. She said what Luna's nervous system could metabolize. From the hallway, a metallic clatter echoed, the distinctive rattle of a mop bucket wheel hitting a threshold lip. A second later, a houseman appeared in the doorway, flustered, a coil of yellow caution chain looped over his arm. "Sorry," he said. There's water in the north corridor." The air unit sweated through. "Go," Jasper told him automatically, rising halfway. "Stay," Adrian countered, already moving. "I've got this. I'm out of practice, but I remember how to lay down towels." He kissed Luna's hair without thinking. "I'll be right back." He jogged out, feeling the oddest, most ordinary thrill at fetching rags. On the way, he passed a mirror. The man looking back wore a loosened tie, charcoal on his wrist, eyes that belonged to someone who had just been given his second first day as a father. Behind him in the music room, Sloane's phone vibrated. She checked the screen, scowled. "They won't leave the gate," she murmured. Dr. Shu didn't look away from Luna. "They can wait until tomorrow," she said mildly. "The world can be late to this one." Sloane exhaled, short, skeptical, and then, in a small act of defiance against her own reflexes, she powered the phone off. Luna looked from Dr. Shu to Jasper. She slid the paper between them and drew 2 more dots, smaller, nestled near the first triangle like fledgling stars beside a constellation. Jasper understood before the others did. His breath caught. "Naomi used to do that," he said, wonder threading the words. "When a kid found their sound, she'd add 2 more points. She called them the listening lights. One for the listener you carry inside, one for the listener you trust outside, so you never speak alone." Outside, the gulls tilted and wrote their crooked letters across the strip of sky. Adrian's footsteps hurried back down the corridor, the old house holding a new shape the way a palm learns the weight of a familiar mug. In the garden, the hydrangeas made their soft blue arguments for a kinder world. In the small breathing center of the room, Luna pressed the pencil to the page and, without looking up, formed a single, careful word. "Jasper." No one clapped. No one exhaled loud enough to break it. Sloane's hand rose involuntarily to her mouth. Dr. Shu's eyes flickered wet. Jasper didn't move at all. He waited the way you wait under stained glass light, head bowed, the holiness found not in marble or doctrine, but in the proof that a voice can return to the body that owns it. Adrian reached the doorway carrying a stack of towels and stopped dead. He understood at once and not at all. He let the towels slide to the floor and felt no shame in that. "Okay," he said thickly, half to the room, half to whatever had finally listened to his years of bargaining. "Okay." What came next would be complicated. The board, the press, the guarded donors who loved a miracle, until it asked them to change policy, the lawyers, the clause Sloane would try to sneak back in under the guise of caution, the way a city can chew a private wonder into ribbons. But some part of him had already stepped off that map. He walked back to the rug and lowered himself until his knees popped. He set one towel in the center of their triangles, like a soft, absurd altar cloth. He placed his palm beside Luna's and, very quietly, he learned the rhythm of 3 points and 2 listening lights. He learned at last to speak with his breathing and to wait with his hands still. The triangle needed no cameras. It didn't require headlines. It asked for one thing only, that the people in its geometry choose to stay. The morning after Luna spoke, the world outside their house was already awake. Cameras perched along the iron gates like crows waiting for light. Reporters murmured through handheld mics about a billionaire's daughter who found her voice overnight. The words miracle, therapy, and mystery janitor flickered on screens as if they were interchangeable. Inside the house, Silence hung between coffee and courage. Adrian Birch stood by the kitchen island, scrolling through a flood of notifications. Every outlet wanted an exclusive. Every investor wanted to know if the breakthrough could be patented. Jasper sat opposite him, shoulders squared, untouched cup in his hands. Luna, between them, leaned against a bowl of oatmeal, eyes steady, tracing a small triangle in the condensation of her glass. "She shouldn't have to see this," Jasper said. "She shouldn't have to hide either," Adrian replied, voice tight. "You think I can stop the press? They've already found the hospital that ran her old charts." Jasper looked up. "You can tell them no." Adrian's laugh was small and tired. "I've spent 20 years learning how to make people say yes. No isn't a word I practice well." Luna reached across the counter and touched her father's wrist. Her fingers were light, deliberate. She looked from him to Jasper, then to the glass triangle she'd drawn, and whispered, barely audible, "Here." The men froze. It was the same tone she'd used before, soft, untrained, but sure. She tapped one drop of water on the counter. "Here," she said again. The air folded in around the sound, fragile as porcelain. Adrian's eyes burned. Jasper felt the back of his throat tighten in quiet awe. Dr. Shu walked in mid-breath, holding her tablet like a priest might hold a psalter. "She's using the anchor pattern," she said softly. 3 points of focus before speech. It's consistent. "She's learning regulation through rhythm," Sue explained. "Sound follows safety." Sloane entered next, phone in hand, hair perfect despite the sleepless night. "Safety won't matter if we don't control the story," she said. "There are drones circling the property. Adrian, the board's calling an emergency meeting. They want you on the record." "No press," Adrian said immediately. "No statements." "They'll write one anyway," she countered. "And if you don't give them facts, they'll make up myths." Jasper pushed his chair back. "Let them. Better myths than machines." The boardroom at Birch Industries wasn't a room so much as a mirror box. 12 directors sat around a table wide enough to seat Doubt beside them. Adrian joined by video feed, Luna's voice still echoing somewhere in the marrow of his bones. "The story's viral," the chairwoman began. "We're talking 70 million views across platforms. We can leverage this. Charitable campaigns, partnerships. Imagine the Birch method for non-verbal rehabilitation." "It's not a method," Adrian said. "It's a moment." Adrian stared into the camera lens as if it were an eye he could reach through. "You want to own breathing now?" "Someone else did claim it," Adrian said. "Her name was Naomi Reed. My daughter's voice started because of her work. Her husband, Jasper, helped Luna remember it. Whatever miracle you think you own, it belongs to them." The chairwoman adjusted her glasses. "Be reasonable. We can credit them both." He ended the call before anyone could reply. The broadcast caught him mid-thought. He turned the volume down, stared at the rain tracing lines down the window. A sound, half between a sigh and a growl, left his chest. Naomi had once told him, "If you ever see light in the fog, don't chase it, walk with it." He had no idea which direction that meant anymore. At the estate, Luna refused dinner. She sat by the window with her sketchbook and crayons, drawing bridges that became rivers, then constellations. Adrian watched her, helplessly proud and terrified at once. When she looked up, her eyes held a question he understood without language. Will they take this away? He knelt beside her. "No one's taking anything, sweetheart." But his voice cracked on the lie. Sloane appeared in the doorway, phone glowing like a blade. "You need to see this," she said. He followed her into the hall. A live feed played on her screen. Paparazzi footage of Jasper stepping out of his apartment, camera flashes exploding around him. "He's being followed," she said. "They found Naomi's records. Someone dug up her therapy papers from the county archive." Adrian rubbed his face. "She didn't publish them." "They were part of a clinical trial that got cut for funding. No patents. Everything's public domain." Adrian felt the weight of irony settle like a stone in his gut. The world had already found its ownership loophole. "What do they want from him?" he asked. Sloane sighed. A quote, a headline, the next viral frame. By dawn, the storm had found the coast. Waves slapped the cliffs. The house trembled under wind, like an old memory trying to escape its frame. Jasper arrived before breakfast, hood soaked, notebook in hand. He had that same steady look, the kind of calm that isn't peace but endurance. Luna saw him through the window and ran to the door before anyone could stop her. She didn't speak this time. She just threw her arms around his waist. He bent down, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Adrian met them at the threshold. "They're coming for you," he said. "I know," Jasper replied, "and that's why I came first." They moved into the sitting room. Dr. Shu sat cross-legged on the rug with Luna, tracing gentle shapes of breath. Sloane hovered by the door, arms folded. "They're saying Naomi's technique was experimental," Adrian said, "that you revived it without clearance." "It wasn't therapy," Jasper said. "It was kindness. She wrote it for people who'd forgotten they could be met halfway." Sloane's tone sharpened. "That doesn't matter to them." "It matters to her," Jasper said, nodding toward Luna. Dr. Sue looked up from the rug. "He's right, the research can't survive being eaten by press. If you want to protect the child, you need to take control of the narrative." Adrian exhaled through his nose. "You're starting to sound like Sloane." "Maybe because she's not wrong," Sue said gently. "But there's a difference between control and clarity." Jasper crossed his arms. "Meaning?" "Meaning you tell the story yourselves," Sue said, "before someone else rewrites it." Sloane blinked. "A statement?" "A letter," Sue corrected, "from Luna's father and from Naomi's husband, about what really happened. No miracle, no product, just two people who waited long enough to meet at the middle of a bridge." Jasper looked at Adrian. "You'd sign that?" Adrian nodded slowly. "If you would." Luna glanced between them, sensing the fragile alliance. Then she reached for her crayon and wrote on the margin of her page in shaky blue letters, "Both ways." The storm hit full force just then, rattling the glass. Adrian smiled despite himself. "Seems we're outvoted." They recorded the letter that night by candlelight, power flickering with the rain. Adrian's voice began the reading, measured, sincere. "Our daughter spoke her first word because someone took time to listen without asking anything in return. The pattern she followed was not a formula. It was the shape of trust." Jasper read next, voice deep, plain, the kind that comes from hands used to lifting the ordinary. "My wife Naomi believed that communication begins where fear ends. What happened in that house was not a miracle. It was memory finding its way home." They ended together. "We hope the world learns what Luna taught us, that a bridge only works if both sides are willing to cross." When the recording finished, the generator hummed and the lights steadied. Luna stood between them, small hands resting on each of theirs. She looked at the camera unafraid and whispered one word into the quiet, "Together." Dr. Shu uploaded the video to a neutral channel. No branding, no logos, no monetization. By morning, it had reached 12 million views. Outside, the press changed its tone. The word miracle faded, replaced by lesson. Emails poured in from parents of non-verbal children, from teachers, from strangers who simply wrote thank you. But there were still those who wanted ownership. Foundations, clinics, opportunists who smelled profit in compassion. Lawsuits began circling the edges of conversation. The board threatened to dissolve Birch Industries' charitable arm if Adrian didn't cooperate. He didn't. Sloane resigned the following week, but not before quietly sending Dr. Sue a copy of every relevant legal document, annotated with handwritten notes in the margins. "Use this to protect them. Don't let them trademark love." Adrian read the note twice and smiled for the first time in days. A month later, the ocean calmed. The rosemary fox had regrown in the garden, unplanned. Luna sat on the lawn, notebook in her lap, drawing triangles that grew into constellations again. Jasper visited less often now, not because of distance, but because the bridge no longer needed tending every day. Still, sometimes he brought coffee or birdseed for the gull that had made the gatepost home. That morning, he watched as Luna added a small sun above her drawing. She turned the page toward him. "Naomi?" she said, testing the name for the first time. He swallowed. "Yes, Naomi." Luna smiled, a slow, blooming thing. "Bridge," he nodded, still standing. That night, Adrian sat by the window with a single candle lit, reading through old emails Naomi had sent to early therapy patients. In one, she had written, "The sound you're looking for already exists. It's waiting for air, not approval." He looked toward Luna's room. She was asleep, breath steady, lips parted just enough to prove the truth of that line. Downstairs, Jasper locked up for the night and paused at the door. He glanced back once, saw the man and the child through the warm glass and exhaled. The rain had stopped. The bridge for now held. He touched 2 fingers to his chest, twice heart, heart, then stepped into the quiet street. Years passed the way shorelines change, grain by grain, hardly noticeable, until one day the view is different. The gates of the Birch estate were lower now, not in metal but in meaning. Delivery vans turned there with boxes of paints and school supplies instead of gilded invitations. The gardens were wilder on purpose. The rosemary had become a stubborn hedge, stitched through with lavender that hummed with bees from April to October. In the upstairs window, light glowed warm over a desk scattered with papers. Luna Birch, no longer a child, bent over a draft and whispered phrases to the room the way singers warm their throats before a crowd. She had a voice most people called soft, until it wasn't, until it filled a space not by volume but by truth. She never learned to love noise. She learned to love courage. Downstairs, Adrian set 2 mugs on a battered oak table that used to live in the garage. Money could have bought a better one. Memory refused to. He glanced at the clock, then at the door. Some habits never left him. Waiting for his daughter had replaced waiting for stock reports. Both could break a heart if you let them. The latch rattled. Jasper stepped in, shaking off the drizzle. He had the same old messenger bag and a newer limp. A fall from a ladder had stiffened his knee last winter. He blamed wet leaves, Adrian blamed time. "You're early," Adrian said. Jasper shrugged. Buses ran faster than the rain. They stood there a moment with the comfort of old friends who remembered when they weren't. Adrian poured coffee. Jasper looked toward the stairs. "She's almost ready," Adrian said. "One more page to cross out and write again." "Sounds like her," Jasper said, half a smile. "Sounds like Naomi." Adrian nodded. He heard that name now like a bell that had already finished ringing, leaving resonance instead of hurt. In the years since the storm and the letter, he and Jasper had stacked small, complicated bricks into something that held. They never said the word forgiveness to each other. They used the word work. The event they were waiting for wasn't a gala or a launch. It was an opening at a community center on the south side of the city, funded by a dozen small donors and one stubborn billionaire who had learned to sign checks for quiet things instead of loud ones. The plaque outside read the Naomi Reed Community Studio. Under it, in smaller letters chosen by Luna, a space for bridges. When Luna descended the stairs, she wore a dark dress and a cardigan with sleeves pushed to the elbows like a painter. Her hair was pinned back badly on one side, a detail that made Adrian's chest ache with affection. She had her mother's eyes, and no mother's name to pin to them. That was life's cruelty and its charge. "You sure?" Adrian asked, not of the event, but of the speech. Luna smiled. "No. That's why it's worth doing." Jasper exhaled something like a laugh. "She's yours and hers," he said. Neither side missed. Neither. They drove with the wipers keeping time. The city outside the windows was the same city that had once watched their front gates like a show. Now it barely looked up. That anonymity was a blessing they worked hard to earn. At the studio, folding chairs made neat rows in a room that smelled faintly of sawdust and lemon oil. Kids drifted between tables, where crayons, clay, and circuits shared space, like neighbors who borrowed sugar from one another. On one wall, a mural covered cinder block with a river of triangles and circles, every shape reaching to touch another. A girl with short hair traced her fingers along one line and whispered the word bridge as if it were a spell. Dr. Shu arrived with a tote bag full of snacks and a stack of envelopes. Age had threaded her hair with silver. Time had not dulled the edge of her kindness. "Board packets for your advisory group," she said, tapping the envelopes. "Do not pretend you will read them." Adrian pressed a hand to his heart. "I've reformed." "Only in the ways that mattered," she replied, then hugged him with a fierceness that made him close his eyes. "I'm proud of you." Jasper helped set out chairs. He moved slower now, but the room moved with him. the way spaces adjust around those who have built them. He paused beneath the mural and tilted his head. "You changed the pattern," he said to Luna without looking over. He was right. The triangles were still there, but instead of locking tips to corners, they overlapped in a soft geometry that allowed imperfection. The lines didn't meet at perfect points. They blurred into small gradients of color. "Naomi's were clean," Luna said. "Life isn't." He nodded. "She'd like that." The program began without ceremony. No ribbon, no podium too tall for most people. The room gathered itself and sat. A teacher with tired eyes thanked the volunteers. A teenager read a poem and stumbled on a line, then chose a better one. In the second row, a boy with a sensory headset flapped his hands and no one shushed him. Luna walked to the front and didn't stand at the front. She stood among. The microphone was there if she needed it. She did not. "When I was small," she began, "I thought words were the only way to say a thing. Then I learned that time says more than language." She glanced at Jasper, then at Adrian, then at the mural. "A man fixed a broken gate once, another learned how to leave it open." The room listened the way rooms do when they've already decided to care. "My mother used to hum without sound," Luna said, surprising even herself by using the word mother for the person she had never met. "She wrote instructions for fear, not to kill it, but to walk beside it. Later, someone else found them. He didn't use them like orders. He used them like a hand." She let that line rest. "I don't know how to repay the past," she said. "I only know how to pay it forward. This is a studio for the ones who need a place to practice being brave. Sometimes bravery is loud, sometimes it's quiet, often it's just staying." She stopped. The room did not clap. Not yet. It breathed. Then from the back, a child's voice rose like an arrow that didn't need to aim. "Together," the girl said, not to Luna, but with her. The applause came slow and honest. Adrian felt his throat burn again, a familiar heat he had learned not to hide. Beside him, Jasper stood very still and pressed 2 fingers to his chest, twice. Dr. Shu pretended not to wipe her eyes with a board packet. After, people crossed the room not to congratulate but to connect. A mother asked Luna how to start when nothing starts. A teenager showed Jasper a sketch of a bridge where the planks were different sizes because that's what he had. Neither corrected the other. By the door, a reporter hovered, not the kind who had waited at their gates years ago, but a local woman with a notebook and a question that wasn't a trap. "Can I ask why you didn't trademark any of this?" she said to Adrian, gesturing to the pattern, the programs, the small brochures that explained nothing and invited everything. Adrian smiled with the humility he'd earned late. "You can't own a path other people need to walk," he said. "You can only light it, then get out of the way." She wrote that down and did not twist it. That felt like a miracle to someone who no longer believed in them. In the afternoon, the studio emptying, Luna found a quiet corner beneath the mural and set a frame against the wall. Inside it, a scan of Naomi's original grid sat on craft paper, annotated with smudged pencil notes and a coffee ring stain like a small planet behind the triangles. Below, a line of handwriting, the only part Naomi had written for someone else, not herself, read, "Begin where they already are." Jasper stared at the frame a long time. He ran his finger above the glass but did not touch it. "She'd hate the font," he said finally, voice rough. Luna laughed. "I know." They stood side by side until the compass inside the day pointed them back to their separate doors. Evening returned them to the kitchen table that once belonged in a garage. The house hummed the way houses do after good work. Luna opened a letter she had tucked in her pocket, an acceptance to a small program she'd thought too small for ambition and exactly right for purpose. She didn't say anything about it. Neither did Adrian. They let the room hold the secret a few more breaths, the way you hold a match out of the wind. "Walk with me," Luna said at last. Father and daughter stepped into the dusky garden. The rosemary sent up its old bright smell when their sleeves brushed it. Down near the low stone wall, the sea was a cuff of silver. They moved slowly along the path Naomi had once not taken, and then, later, taken over and over in other feet. "Do you remember the first word you said after the storm?" Adrian asked. Luna nodded. "Together." He swallowed. I didn't deserve to hear it then. Maybe not, she said lightly. But you stayed. He closed his eyes a second against the softness of that blow. I am trying to stay. That's the work, she said. Bridges need maintenance. He laughed. You sound like Jasper. She looked out at the water and for a moment looked exactly like the woman in the scanned grid. I sound like myself. They reached the gate. It creaked, familiar. Luna pressed her palm to the wood. When I was little, I thought this was a wall. It was, Adrian said, until it wasn't. She pushed it open and stepped through, then turned and waited until he followed. On the road beyond, a gull landed and tilted its head like it had a question. Luna tilted hers back. Each recognized the other as irregular, as beings who had returned often enough to belong. Back inside, Jasper had left a package on the table, plain paper, string in an honest bow. He did that sometimes, disappearing before they could thank him, leaving gifts that weren't gifts as much as continuations. Adrian untied the string and set the paper aside like a ritual that deserved no hurry. Inside, a book sat handmade. Not fine, perfect. Cardboard covers wrapped with cloth the color of the sea just before rain. On the first page, a photograph from years before, Naomi's grid, Luna's triangles, Jasper's blunt pencil. Beneath it, a line in Jasper's blocky hand. What we learn, we share. Adrian traced the letters. He thought about ownership, about loss, about how much smaller his world had been when it was full of bigger things. He closed the book and let the weight of it press into his palms. At the window, the evening did what evenings do. It asked the house to dim and the people to gather. Adrian turned off the last light. The dark wasn't frightening anymore. It felt like a place where voices carry further. Luna took the book to her desk. She slid it between a notebook and a jar of blunt pencils. She sat. She didn't speak. She wielded silence the way she had learned to, with intention, with kindness. Then, as if answering an invitation older than language, she began to hum, and the hum found a word, and the word found a path, and the path widened into something that could hold more than one person at a time. In the room below, Adrian rested his hand on the old oak table and breathed deeply, counting without numbers. He thought of a night years ago when rain thrummed against glass and shame found his mouth and finally taught it how to say a true sentence. He thought of the distance between power and care and how far he had walked. On a street one neighborhood over, Jasper locked the door of a smaller apartment with wider windows. He set his knee carefully on the first stair and smiled at the ghost who never frightened him. The city felt for once like a place that kept promises. He tapped his chest twice to the rhythm of work and rest. At the studio, the mural dried from a fresh stroke where a child had smeared yellow into blue and refused to fix it. No one would. The smear was not a mistake. It was a bridge where a line had forgotten to be brave and then remembered. And somewhere between a sea that didn't care what humans named it and a sky that let them, a voice rose into the quiet of a house that had finally learned how to listen. Not a miracle, not a method, a family, a bridge, still standing. Years later, long after the sea had eaten the edges of the old road, the studio still stood. It had outlived its paint twice and its roof once, its windows fogged in winter and bloomed with salt in spring. Children's laughter leaked through every crack like sunlight that refused to stay outside. A woman arrived before dawn each day. She carried a thermos of coffee and a small box of chalk. Her hair was darker now, tied carelessly, and there were lines near her eyes from years of squinting at bright things. Her name was Luna Reed Birch, though she no longer corrected anyone who mixed the order. She walked the quiet halls, touching the murals as if they were instruments she was tuning. The triangles Naomi had drawn long ago were nearly hidden beneath new colors, pinks, greens, fragments of words children had tested and claimed. In one corner hung a new drawing. A child's hand had scrawled it in shaky blue, 3 dots joined by a wobbly arch, and beneath them the words, "Here, here, here." Luna smiled. She recognized the handwriting. The boy's name was Theo. He hadn't spoken when he first came. Trauma, the doctor had said, too clinical to be cruel. He had watched others for weeks before drawing that bridge. Yesterday, He had whispered the word home, the same syllable Naomi once used when she described peace. Luna sat by the window where the sea used to be visible before the city built its own skyline between them. She opened a notebook, the same one Jasper had given her on her 17th birthday, the cloth cover still the color of the sea before rain. Inside, she had written letters over the years, never mailed, addressed to people who had gone where words couldn't follow. "Dear Naomi," one began, "your triangle's held. Another, dear Jasper, I found your gull. It lives by the roof now. And once, dear Dad, I finally stopped trying to fix the sound that broke me. It wasn't broken. It was waiting." She read them sometimes when the building was empty. Today she didn't. She only wrote one new line at the bottom of the last page. "The bridge never ends. It just changes hands." Outside, footsteps approached, small, quick, uncertain. Theo stood at the doorway, a paper triangle folded in his palm. "Can I show you something?" he asked. The words came carefully, like stepping stones. Luna turned. "Of course." He crossed the floor and opened his hand. The triangle was imperfect, corners soft from being folded too long. "I made one for you," he said, "but it's smaller." Luna knelt until their eyes met. "Small things are easier to carry," she said. He nodded solemnly. "That's what bridges are for, right? So people don't have to carry everything?" She felt the breath catch in her chest. "Yes," she said quietly, "exactly that." Theo placed the triangle on her knee. "Can we build one today, a real one? Outside, across the puddle near the steps?" Luna smiled. "We can start." They walked out to the yard, where rain from the night before had left the ground soft and sweet. They gathered stones, sticks, bits of driftwood. The bridge they built was crooked, its planks uneven, but when they stepped back, the reflection in the water made it whole. Theo grinned. "It works." Luna looked at the shimmering image. "It always does." She didn't tell him about the other bridges, the invisible ones, the ones that stretched between past and future, grief and gratitude, silence and song. She didn't need to. He'd find them in his own time, as all children do when the world gives them patience instead of instructions. The wind picked up. Somewhere above, a gull circled, older now but still wild, its cry scattering through the air like chalk dust. Theo waved. "Is that yours?" Luna watched the bird wheel against the sky, then shook her head with a smile. "No," she said. "It's ours." When the boy ran ahead to fetch another stone, Luna stayed by the puddle watching the ripples settle. The water held their bridge and the reflection of clouds drifting like unspoken words. She touched her chest twice, heart, heart, and whispered to the wind that always carried sound farther than distance allowed. "Thank you." Then she stood, brushed the mud from her hands and walked toward the open doors of the studio, where new laughter waited to build new shapes. The tide hummed below, steady as breath. And in that hum, if one listened closely enough, there was an echo, soft, human, endless. Not a miracle, a continuation. End of story. The echo.